G'day everyone, welcome to the How To ODST Magnum. Of course, this is tutorial part 2. My name is Andrew DFT, and let's get this video wrapped up so that way you can have a really cool looking prop to either display on your wall or add to a costume. So we won't waste time, let's jump straight into it. Alright, so we'll get into it. So what we're going to do now is, of course, where we left off, we were pretty much ready to add some extra details in. So we'll grab this butt section of the gun and we'll trace this out so we have two sides, both a left and a right. Once you've cut those out of the foam, what we can then do is we can transfer this horizontal lines in to give a depth level on one of the pieces. Just one, we don't need it on both. So go ahead and make that incision, cutting all the way through the foam. Make sure you do flip it around so that way you get a nice vertical cut all the way through, so that way it's as flat as possible. Then what we're going to do is add in this horizontal line here on the surface of the foam. You can do this on both, and then go ahead and add in the depth line like this. This is going to allow us to bevel the edge to give it a bit more of a 3D perspective. Of course, the tip of this part of the Magnum does have this nice kind of curvature to it, so that's what we're trying to replicate here with this beveling technique. Then of course, all you're going to need to do is simply grab your hot glue and actually put it into position. Be sure to remember which side is the forward and back. You can just quickly refer to your templates for that and then stick it in position. It should fit in relatively easily. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab the template, we're going to cut out all these rectangle sections within the design and then transfer them onto the foam like so. Once you've done that, you can simply just score all of them. Do take your time because you want to make sure that each one of these little squares does get scored properly, because remember, when scoring, if you overshoot the lines, you will actually make some incisions on the foam, which will show when we give it the heat treatment. So of course you don't want that unless you're trying to give it a nice scratched effect, which that works. Otherwise, do avoid it. Alright, so we'll start moving on to more of the tactical stuff that sit under the suppressed section of this Magnum. So what we'll do is we'll grab this template and we'll slowly work through it by making two sections out of EVA foam, a left and a right, being sure to flip the template. Then simply cut them out of the foam and glue them together like so, so that way we get the thickness up. Now what we can do is we can break apart the template. We'll start off with this rectangle slash oval shape. We'll transfer that onto the foam like you can see here, and then we'll break it apart even further and add these little top rectangle sections and put them on as well. Now what we want to do is we want to, of course, give this a bit more of a 3D look. So we can add in these depth lines up the top here, which will allow us to actually cut into the foam. Rather than beveling, we'll actually cut into it. But first, we'll just go ahead and score this section just to make sure we don't forget. And because we can't be bothered cutting this whole section out, so scoring is an easy way to do that. But for these top parts, we do and can do this rather easily. So all we're doing is cutting in on both angles to give a nice incision, and it should just pop it out like that. And then of course you can go ahead and give it the heat treatment and everything should really start looking quite nice, and then just simply glue it into position. It should sit right at the back of the suppressor and just before the trigger guard. And now we can pretty much repeat the process. We're going to do exactly the same thing, well, almost exactly the same thing on the second part. This is of course where the laser scope will go. If you want to actually put one in, or an actual working torch, you can. I would recommend it. It would actually be pretty cool. But if you don't, we can simply just do exactly what we did out of foam, drawing out two sections, then breaking apart the template and transferring everything on. What we're doing here is we've just added a little beveled edge just to give the back section a bit more of a 3D look to it, just because it does have it in the original design. So I thought, well, we may as well just transfer it across because it's at no extra difficulty. Now what we're going to do is pretty much do a beveled edge for the bottom of this. So that's really not that hard. We add in that horizontal line, then we add in the depth line of your choice, and simply bevel off that edge like I'm doing here. Of course, you've got to flip that across, so you do it on both sides, and you shouldn't have any real issues with doing that, and it's just going to make the design and the edge of the design look a hell of a lot nicer. Now you can cut out the sections on this template, these two square sections, using a craft blade, and transfer their positions onto the foam. Then of course what we'll do is we'll cut out these little tiny 3 rectangles at the bottom of this template and transfer their position into it as well. it will overlap the beveled edge section, so you can just raise it a bit if you want, just to make sure that it does still keep the appearance that we can see here. Now be sure to add in the extra levels that overlap the beveled edge, just so we can give it a bit more of a 3D perspective, so that way when we score it like we're doing now and then we heat it up, all the design should actually look rather excellent, because it's gone into not only just a flat appearance but curved around, making the most of that beveled edge. Of course then you can just glue it into position just under the one we did earlier, and well, it's really starting to look like a ODST suppressed Magnum, which is great. But there's a few more things we need to do, so of course we'll get into that by cutting out the template for the trigger guard and creating 2 sections from the foam, and then just go ahead and glue them together. Now if you want, you can do a technique that I always do for pieces like this, especially fragile pieces that I want to hold while in construction, is just put some hot glue along the seam line of this section, and using the hot metal tip of the hot glue gun itself, melt it into a nice flat kind of paste. When it solidifies, it should just hold everything together, and then of course you can go in and actually seal up those lines with some art clay later on down the line. But for this, it just holds it together during the construction period. If you want, you could actually just leave it like that, as it does kind of cover the seam rather well. And of course, we couldn't have a Magnum without a mag. So these designs have been well recognized for having an extended mag, so we'll jump in and do that now. We'll grab the template and we'll actually cut it into 2 sections, because we'll do them in 2 different stages. All we'll do first is grab the, I guess, the shaft of the magazine, and we'll draw in on one of them. You don't need to do it on 2, but on one of them we'll draw in this depth line here, make sure it wraps all the way around, and make sure that it is the same all around on all the sides, and then you can just simply cut it out. I recommend using another piece of foam like I am here, just as a backboard. That way it's like a solid ½ inch away from your fingers, so you don't shave half your thumb off, because yeah, that wouldn't be pretty and it wouldn't be nice, and a Magnum is not worth losing a finger on. Then what we're going to do is grab your template, cut off the perimeter edges, and you can transfer those on, or you can just freehand them on to the shaft of this design itself, and then simply bevel off those edges just to make the magazine kind of wrap around the actual design, giving a bit more of a 3D perspective. Jumping onto the second part, all we need to do is actually trace out a rectangle the length of the template, as you can see on screen, and a bit thicker than what the shaft of the magazine we've just done. So as you can see here, it's just exceeding the thickness a bit, so you can just freehand out that that template, I guess, and cut it out of the foam. Once you've done that, we're going to simply add in some depth levels that you can see here marked on screen, and then just add in some depth lines again on the vertical end, giving us this beveled edge you can see that I'm cutting out here. This is just going to allow the butt of the magazine just to have a nice kind of slope, and of course you can actually leave the textured side on if you want, because it does make it look rather nice and give it kind of like a grated feel to the end of the magazine. Of course, if you want, you can simply just bring it in and actually trim that off, but from here I actually quite like the look, so I left it on. Then all that's left is just to glue it into position. Now, because we did cut off one of the layer sections a bit, shave it off I guess, you should have this nice kind of terraced effect, which makes it look like it's a part of a different layer, which of course it should, because it has to slide into the actual handle itself. So that was just a nice little cheat way of achieving that without too much hassle in trying to really bevel apart the foam level. Now of course we need to do the trigger. Now the trigger is simple, just grab the template that is on your paper, hopefully you haven't lost it, simply trace it out onto the foam. Once that's out, of course we need to kind of get rid of this textured side, so what we'll do is we'll just draw out a depth line that goes all the way around and then simply cut it out. So very simple, and you should have a thinned version of that now in the one singular layer of the foam. Then simply cut the template along its guidelines to give you where the tip of the trigger will be, draw on this nice designed line, and just go ahead and score it on both sides, that is. Then just give it the heat treatment and it should pop quite a bit and just be a nice little fill-in for you. Now if it doesn't fit in exactly, just kind of customize it, give it a bit of a trim where it's needed to make sure that it fits in there nice and flush and nice and snug. But we're almost there, don't fear, we've got 2 more things we need to tackle, well, 3 more things. Well, not in reference to the 3 things on screen, but 3 more pieces of detail. So what you'll need to do is quickly transfer those little squares onto the foam and then simply cut them out of the foam and then cut the layer of the foam maybe into 3/4 and then glue them into position like you can see here. Then we can simply do the exact same thing for this top section, which is the iron sight area, and we'll cut the foam in half and then simply glue it into the top there. Nice and easy. Still following? Awesome. Then what we'll do is we'll grab those circles that you can see on the template and we'll actually transfer them onto the foam, creating these 2 circles on screen, and then we'll simply carefully cut them out, carefully and simply, I guess, and to make sure that they are rather spherical. If you want, you can actually use another circular piece if you have one. Otherwise, just be very careful out of the foam and then simply cut the foam in half and glue them into position here. This is just going to act as the tips of the lights or the laser scopes. But if you are using an actual laser scope, then of course you won't need to do this because that'll be the bulb of that section. But for the most part, and especially for the end of this video, that's as far as we can go, and as far as I'm going to take you on making this suppressed Magnum. Right now it looks 100% like what it should, which is fantastic, and I really hope yours turns out to a stage that you're extremely happy with. And of course, take it further. If you want, customize extra features, add in more details, be creative with it. That's what I implore you to do, and as a artist and as a creator, you'll learn from and do far better in the future. So that's it. Hopefully you guys managed to follow along through both parts in the tutorials and you now have a prop that looks pretty decent and somewhat like this. Remember, if it doesn't turn out exactly like mine has on screen, all I can recommend is practice, 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 and enough practices to cover 20 man's hands. All the experience you do, all the times you try it will always increase your skill level, and your design and your final product will constantly get better. I mean, I've built about 300 props plus out of styrofoam, so it is a long journey, but for most of you creating props now with these tutorials, you're looking, your props are looking 10 times better than mine ever did when I first started. So of course, all that's left for you now to do is take it, seal it, and paint it. This is a very simple paint job I did just to quickly get this video out in time. But for you guys, you can of course add your own designs, your own logos or stripes or custom paint job, however you wish. There's plenty of tutorials out there. Or if you want a very basic beginner sealing and painting tutorial, you can simply click the link here and it'll open up a new tab for that video that I created myself to help give you an awareness on how to basically go about doing this prop. If you're a subscriber, well, you'd also know that I released the SMG tutorial vid, so now, hopefully, you can have the SMG and the Magnum to go with your ODST costume and look badass. Yeah, dual wielding. Of course, that's it for me. Thank you very much for watching. Of course, I'd love to see all your progress pics, so be sure to send them my way on my Facebook fan page, and I will catch you guys later.